Hello, Empire Builders. Today on the Build Your Empire podcast, I sit down with Hardik Mehta, Global Head of Risk and Regulatory Compliance at JPMorgan Chase, and former cyber risk leader at Uber and Microsoft. From growing up in Mumbai to reshaping enterprise risk with AI, his story is about resilience, global leadership, and building trust at scale. Coming up in 1 minute. Welcome, Empire Builders. You're listening to the Build Your Empire podcast, the show where ambitious minds gather to learn, grow, and create. Here, we dive into the stories of entrepreneurs, athletes, leaders, and innovators who are shaping the world around us. Together, we'll unpack the strategies, triumphs, and challenges that come with building something meaningful, empowering you to keep pushing towards your vision. So let's get inspired, let's get motivated, and let's build our empires, brick by brick, step by step. Welcome to the Build Your Empire podcast. Welcome back to the Build Your Empire podcast. Today's guest is Hardik Mehta, currently the Global Head of Risk and Regulatory Compliance at JPMorgan Chase. But Hardik's journey started far from Wall Street, in the suburbs of Mumbai, with 2 bags, $800, and a dream. Since then, he's helped lead cyber risk and compliance for some of the world's most complex organizations, from ADP to PwC, Microsoft, and most recently Uber, where he spearheaded automation programs like Project Matterhorn to reshape risk culture and align security with engineering at scale. In this episode, we dive into what it takes to build global teams, automate trust into the software development lifecycle, and use AI not just as a tool, but as a strategy. You'll also hear his thoughts on shadow AI, DevSecOps, leadership under pressure, and why empathy, resilience, and documentation might be the most underrated cybersecurity tools of all. Let's get into it. Hardik, thank you for joining the Build Your Empire podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nick.
So today, what I'd like to do is, get to know you first. I'd like to see if you could maybe tell me a little bit about, where you grew up, and you grew up in Bombay, and what your early influences were that planted the seed and kind of laid the groundwork for where you are today.
Oh, amazing question. Let's rewind the clock 40 years back. Born and raised in a suburb of Bombay. When it was still called Bombay, it's now Mumbai. It's New York on steroids. The city never sleeps. It's I would say, my favorite city in the world. And the childhood growing up was very simple. It was very outside. So you don't have a lot of electronic toys. You don't have a lot of external validation factors which will make you happy. The only thing you have is your good friends, your foundation blocks, a lot of love from your parents and your grandparents. And off you go. Things definitely were hard, but one thing which kept me going and the family going was motivation from my mom. She retired as a high school teacher back in India, I would say 10 years back. So education was always a good focus, but at the same time, it was always about being rounded, always about being present in your environment and always doing the right thing for the community and your people, which helped me tremendously when I moved to United States at a very tender age, 20 years back. And B, it kept me grounded because you never forget where you come from. And that always is always at the back of my mind that the journey is just getting started. Still have a lot to go.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So you've lived in a lot of countries, 5 countries, I think: India, US, Argentina, Australia, UK. So how have these diverse experiences, really formed you and shaped your approach to leadership and where you are today with cyber?
No, good question. First 20 years in India, then I did consulting for EY for good 6 years, which into a global practice took me everywhere. And the diversity comes with a lot of challenges because you start over, you don't know how long you're going to be there. but it also comes with a lot of responsibility that someone is showing you trust to do a transformation program for, say, a Fortune 50, Fortune 100 client and moving you all across the globe. You need to not only bestow that trust, but it also you need to show that you can do it. And at the same time, raise your hand and say, hey, these are the things I don't know. Like in Argentina, language is one of the biggest barriers. So keeping everyone honest about it. In UK, the regulated markets are very different, and I wasn't part of the UK during when the UK was getting split from the EU. So a lot of regulations were changing overnight. Privacy was taking a huge center focus, and I did a lot of work between UK and Ireland just for privacy for big banks and big pharmas. So in a nutshell, the technology, the process, and the people, wherever you go, generally remains the same. But one thing which changes is how do you navigate those external factors? Maybe can be geopolitical, as we see right now, as market influences changes, as economies at scale change. It can be regulated with GDPR and privacy coming in during that time, 10 years back, or it can be both along with an external stress of securing your own IP from nation state actors. So those criterias and conditions you need to understand, and then you evolve your program and your strategy. At the same time, it's also a lot of inner work which you need to do, that hey, I'm taking this risk. I'm moving out of my comfort zone and I'm starting a new life in somewhere I don't know a lot about. How will I navigate? And then one thing which I always believe in is you attract the energy you give. So if you are very robust, you're very self-centered, you're emotionally regulated, and then you know that you want to do the right thing, you'll start attracting that kind of people and that kind of nucleus around you. And you will come back and say, this is looking hard, it is challenging, but it will be rewarding in long run. So you need to adapt that mindset.
Of all those countries, was there one particular that was difficult to get acclimated to? Maybe Argentina because of the language?
Yeah, Argentina was hard because language, people also work very differently. It's just a very relaxed culture. So getting people to do things is very hard. You have to influence a lot without authority. Authority does not work there. And also they like the party. So generally when for first few weeks for me it was you eat your dinner at 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. Then they go back to home, meet their family, and then 12 o'clock they'll text you and say, "Hey, let's party until 4 o'clock in the morning." And then they show up to work at like 8:39 again. And I'm like, I'm not used to this life. And that's that siesta lifestyle from the European countries. And for first 2 3 weeks where I'm consulting and taking all my clients out, it just becomes a real nightmare where A, the language is not my friend, B, that time zone is not my friend, and C, doing that day in, day out again and again. I'm like, guys, we need to just do this once a week. So that along with a lot of regulations, because Argentina went through a huge political, socio-economical drop during that time where the presidents have changed, the requirements of cyber changed suddenly, the banks started being very stringent. So it was an emotional turmoil period for the residents, but it was also a regulated, what do you say, stick. Which was used, and me coming as an outsider and trying to tell them, hey, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, or you'll be fined, or you'll be penalized, or your bank will lose X amount of money, becomes insanely hard. And then you need to navigate that cultural boundaries with a lot of ease.
And inflation was probably pretty high when you were there
Yes,
too, right?
yes, it was the highest in the world at that point of time.
Yeah, maybe you didn't keep your money in Argentine funds because
No, I did not. No, I was not allowed to due to my independent things.
okay, so that probably helps because I know a lot of people like Americans keep their American money just because of the inflation, right? So, was there a specific moment or that pulled you into the world of cybersecurity and risk? I mean, what was the spark? Was it inspiration from when you were younger with your parents, or is it something else that really drove you
It was
into
a
this?
combination of two factors, Nick. I would say one of the biggest factors was I was always an engineer. I like to build things. So I said I'm going to be a software engineer back in India and then see where I go. And I came to US, and then I pursued my education in computer science with my master's, but the focus was financial markets. And this is 2008. The market collapsed, right?
Right.
Bear Stearns went down, Brown Harriman Brothers went down,
Hmm.
Merrill Lynch became Bank of America, and it was such a very turmoil period in the American history and even in European history that me coming as an international kid could not get a job. And at that point of time, I had all these cyber skills because of my curriculum. And um, ADP came to my campus here in New York and New Jersey, both at Stevens and NYU. Because I have a sandwich degree. I have a degree from Stevens as master's in computer science, and then I have an MBA from NYU, and they recruit heavily from both the schools. And they met me, and then there was this two different stratas of kids, 21, 22-year-old kids going into workforce at that point of time, and work was very hard to find. One was all the bright kids who wanted to work for the Googles, the Goldman Sachs of the house, and do all the software engineering work where they wanted to build products. And then there was only me and maybe four or five other kids in the second row, which where we said we want to do operations. We want to run big teams and see how these operations scale from the cyber landscape, more from the infrastructure landscape. That if and cloud was not a point, right? So how do you rack all these servers? How do you make sure that the communication protocols are secure and the firewalls are working fine? Because that was also my core focus with computer networking. So I went into that ADP interview and they point blank asked me that why don't you want to code and then configure things compared to why do you want to rack servers? And I'm like, that sounds more interesting to me. A and B, I had always a penchant for travel. So I'm like, ADP has 20 different geolocated data centers. If I get this role, I'll be able to walk into these data centers, remove the racks out, remove the switches out, remove the mainframes out, replace them, change the wiring, keep them secure, apply biometrics on it. This was even before eye retina scans were available. So I'm like, this is fascinating for me. And they like me, I like them. And I was one of the very few international kids in both the schools to land a full-time gig along with my visa restrictions. And then they took care of my visa restrictions. They took care of my green card and all the immigration at that point of time. And even getting a job was hard. So that became 2008 2009 became the pivotal point for me to enter this infrastructure world. And I did that for 4.5 years with them. And I vouch for that company. I recommend people to that company all the time. That the culture at ADP is mind blowing. But once I got to ADP, Roland Cloutier was a CISO. He's one of my very good mentors. I worked for him for about 3 years directly, doing all these big, team building around the globe. And I said, Roland, I want to do something else. And then he's like, if you're not happy here, tell me what you want to do. And I'm like, I want to do consulting. And now I want to get out of the finance, the payrolls of the house, and I want to do manufacturing and I want to do tech. I just want to do those two domains. And then ADP will not be able to give me that, but consulting will be able to provide me that landscape. And I went to EY and stayed there for good 6 years. And that's where I would say a lot of my mature cyber skills, really precision driven impact started coming out because now I am sitting with the CISOs at Microsoft. Sitting with CISOs at Coca-Cola, Caterpillar, Porsche, BMW, Merck, a lot of household names, right, which you use day in, day out, and very unique challenges. But the fundamental still remains the same that how do you protect the IP, how do you protect the employee, and how do you protect the payment gateways? Because I came from ADP and payment gateways was one of my core strong suite. And then how do you corral the beast on the regulations? Because all of these are globally regulated companies. So that was, I would say, that spark at EY where I was always on a plane from Monday to Friday, nonstop, close to like at least 40 weeks out of 52 in a year. But it gave me a lot of international travel, a lot of really good learning experiences, and above all, it helped me started understanding the cyber landscape much more in depth.
Well, thank you for that. Sounds like a great experience, both personal and with work. Any personal risks that you took early on that helped shape your path?
Yes, a lot of personal risk. So one of the biggest personal risk was coming to US with two bags, $800 in my pocket, and the first semester fees paid by my parents, which was pretty hefty. It was close to $30,000 back in 2005 and 2006. So it's equivalent to like 150 grand right now. But then after that, I did not know where the fees are going to come, how am I going to survive, and what I'm going to do. And I call that character building. I really recommend that to a lot of kids, both domestic as well as international, that if you get a chance to go away from home and build your life and build your character and show yourself that what you are capable of, there's nothing like that.
Build your empire.
Yes, you do. You 100% build your story, build your empire.
Yeah, it certainly shapes you and provides a lot of character, a lot of experiences. I'm sure you've got some phenomenal stories, which we'll get into. So you have some passion around photography. Sounds like you do a lot of travel. So
Yep,
photography in the Arctic, Antarctica.
yep, yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's my passion project. I do a lot of wildlife conservation work for Nat Geo and WWF, a Worldwide Federation Forum. And it came from spending time in Argentina, and then Argentina is a tip where you go into Antarctica, and started talking to a lot of these explorers, and reading more about them on how they think. Right, there's a lot of these Antarctic explorers who just believe in themselves and their team, and then just started exploring things. A lot of them, especially from Europe, who had sometimes no funds, they pooled their own funds. They went actually to their friends and families like a venture capitalist, pooled the funds out, and started doing this exploration. So that's where that passion of understanding your own strengths, be understanding how your team will be pooled and what your team can do, and assigning them the roles, and see, trying to not only find something out in the wild, what do you say, frontiers, but also getting a sense of accomplishment out of it, that hey, you're trying to do something which very few people in the world can do, not more than 5%, maybe even 1%. So you're blessed and you're grateful on a day-to-day basis, but at the same time you're exploring both your inner strengths, your inner weaknesses as well, but you're exploring the world outside. And the other thing which I really like is when I don't work, I spend a lot of time with animals as well as nature, especially in these extreme polar climates, because it shows you how minuscule you are in the bigger scheme of things. Where you go to Antarctica and even to places like Greenland and Svalbard, you see these ice cliffs, which are massive. They're like more than a 200 feet towers. They're bigger than Burj Khalifa. And you see, when your boat is parked next to it, you're like, oh, this is so tiny. Like, it shows you your place in the grand scheme of things, and it also keeps me grounded for that. And on top of it, it gives me a lot of calmness, because now I'm not thinking tech. I'm completely away from tech. I don't even buy internet packages on those things. I read my books. I speak to a lot of explorers. I speak to a lot of conservation people, conservation experts. And just when you bounce ideas off and get energies exchanged with these people, you start thinking that there's a parallel world outside who are completely away from the world of tech, the world of regulations, the world of cyber, and they are doing so many cool things which you could not even think of.
So all this travel and involvement keeps you balanced and inspired in your personal life.
Oh yeah, 100%. I come back very much wired. I come back with a new renewed energy, and I say, now for next 6 to 8 months, let's go and kill it.
You mentioned animals. Are there one or two specific animals that maybe intrigue you, or ones
Oh
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
like?
I'm in love with penguins. I really like penguins. I really like polar bears. I'm planning a next expedition in Churchill, Canada, sometime either this October. Worst case, it will be October next year, to go to all the way to Manitoba for a week and just to be with polar bears in Manitoba. It just excites me. A, because they're so rare, and B, they live in a very, very old school what do you say, lifestyle of staying together, doing things for each other. So they are also very community focused. So you learn a lot about just by seeing them.
So have you been to Ecuador or Galapagos Islands?
No, that's on my list. I've not been there.
Okay, I've been to Ecuador. I haven't been to Galapagos. It's Galapagos is very expensive, especially I think if you're not a citizen of Ecuador.
Galapagos has those big turtles.
Yeah, it's quite a trip. It's it's pretty far distance. It's part of Ecuador, but boy,
Yeah.
it's pretty far away. I think it's almost across the same distance as the United States. from the coast, the continental coast, to the Galapagos. So you've had some pretty high stake roles at Microsoft and ADP, PwC, Ernst & Young, and now Uber. What are some of the toughest decisions you've had to make along the way?
Oh, good question. I would say some of the tough decisions is around changing the program as you enter. So, 30, 60, 90 day, when you start a role, you come in and you do your pulse check, as I like to call it, with yourself, that what you heard during your interview cycles, is it resonating? You write all that down. And then you do a 30, 60, 90 day pulse check with your leadership and even a skip level leadership, and then give them the top five pain points, I say, and top five good things. And then of the top five pain points, you come and prioritize that, hey, I'm going to only tackle two in this year, and I'll tackle the next two or three in next year or so. And most of them are around changing the charters drastically, hitting a reset where you say all that which is done is good, but it is not yielding us the results. And then you might have heard the saying is, if we do something in a certain way which we have always done, it will always give you a certain result which you have always got.
Right.
So you need to change what you did, how you did it, why you did it, to yield a different result. And those are some of the very difficult decisions, and especially with now with the advent of AI in last 3 4 years. Especially when I was leaving Microsoft, I was dabbling with Copilot, and then we were doing a lot of compliance checks on Copilot. Journey which we are now embarking on is, how do we gain efficiency? How do we move charters so that our engineers and our star people can do much more impact driven work, and all the mundane work which can be automated can be just given to an AI bot, and we don't talk about it. So those are some of the very hard decisions which we have to take, and we'll keep on taking in future as well. And a lot of it is out in the open as well. Shopify CEO sent a letter to all his employees, I think 4 weeks back, which says only four things: no incremental headcount, find everything which AI can do, go to your customers and show them what AI can do for them using the product. And the last one is continually reiterating what we do, but at a breakneck neck speed. So these are the four similar mantras which I'm taking personally in my life, as well as I embark more further into this intelligent driven world. And I'm a huge fan of Westworld. I don't know if you have seen Westworld, but if not, I'll recommend that. That was like 10 years back, but it was very similar where we are heading, where um, there's this whole parallel world where you have people who look like people, but they're actually chips inside them, and they program them. They take them to a service station at the end of the day, clean them up, and feed them with more data. So and then when they go and mingle externally, you'll never even realize that this person is not a real person, because the flesh is there, the emotions are there, the answers are coming out very accurately. And then there are a couple of episodes where the where the central character tries to throw the machine away by asking very random questions, and the machine has to relearn, reiterate, and repivot. So I think we are entering into a very similar world like Westworld.
This is the series on HBO, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I think I've seen there. I don't know how many seasons there were. I've seen at least two.
Yeah, there are
Um,
four.
there are four. Okay,
Yeah,
I think I've seen two. Because it could kind of chaotic
it
in some of
is.
the scenes. But yeah, very interesting, and appreciate that parallelism. Can you walk us through a moment in your career when you stepped into leadership and then you owned a mission, and the team and the transformation?
Yes, 100%. So, and I've done it all. But I'll take my example from Microsoft. So at Microsoft, I was called in from Australia. I was in Australia, and it was peak of COVID. They were going through a huge regulatory challenge. I cannot speak about it, but it was really messy. I get a call from very senior leadership there and say, hey, in 6 months, right now the vaccines are not out, but in 6 months, we want you in Seattle, and we want you to run a big team to get us regulated and certified in these three, four verticals across like 10 countries. And I'm like, okay, let's just step back, and then let's see what the team is, what the mission is, and how do we do the transformation. And then I spent that 6 to 8 months in Australia figuring all that out. And then once it was a little bit good environment, and then a little bit safer environment during 2021. I moved back to Seattle, and I have this mantra which I got from one of my mentors. And he spent a lot of time in U.S. Army, and he says, "Mission first, people always." So they use this for all the cadets during big battles, right? So always remember your mission. Mission is first. You cannot sacrifice that. People always. You don't have to sacrifice the people. Also, you can repivot the people, and you can give them very impact driven roles where they are good. And then the other one which I use again and again is horses for courses. Is like you need special horse for a special course. A normal horse cannot run on every course. So you have to identify that as well. And when I step into those leadership roles, my first 30-day period is just listening. Sometimes it becomes 60-day period. I do a lot of one-on-ones with all these leaders, understand their pain point, find commonalities, and then I say, do we have the right people in those roles? If not, how do we either move them around? How do we give them much more meaningful work? And if we cannot, then there's always that hard conversation which needs to happen that, hey, this is not going to work out. And then the third one is around process and the tech. That is the tech optimized? Do we have more tech than we need? A lot of times in these big organizations, because funding was never an issue before, you have same technologies doing similar things in each vertical, but they don't talk to each other. They're so siloed. So there's always a chance to optimize, normalize that tech stack, and say, if we sunset three of them, we'll right away save $5 million just in operation costs. Let's just do that. And that's a hard call because a lot of jobs are at stake at that point of time. A lot of operation teams are running those tech stacks. And also there's a huge change element, and then people fear change because now suddenly their shiny kid is going to be taken away from them. So how do you communicate? And then I learned really, really well from my Microsoft leadership that you communicate same message in four different ways to four different audiences. First, you communicate the tactical message to your engineers and the doers of the house. Second, you communicate a very strategic message. This is a vision. This is a goalpost. We have to hit right to make that goal to your peers so that you can buy and influence your peers. That's the second level. Third is you communicate a step above that. Once you do this, what is the outcome and what is the ROI to your leadership? And then the fourth is you package all that. In that you communicate that to your board of directors, your external stakeholders, and your regulators that we are doing this. This is our 1 year program. Once we are done with that, this is what we are going to get. And this is going to eventually save us $15 million over the course of 18 months. Because overall, my board of directors generally will ask me, so what? Why, and what is the bottom number I'm going to save. It's always about a dollar value, and then
Right.
that's where I'm heading also, where I want to be known in next coming 10 years as a risk quantification expert. And then I'm learning a lot from likes of Dr. Jack Jones, who wrote Fair, and a lot of my financial gurus here on Wall Street in New York, who started doing all these Monte Carlo simulations and ordinal number simulations for their financial algorithms like 20 years back. So the industry is pivoting at that point of time right now, where automation is so much prevalent in the market. And what we want to do is we want to reach to a point where we say, this is 0 and 1. We can quantify every single incident or an issue or a risk to that dollar value. And that gives a lot of confidence to our leadership, saying that we are heading in the right direction.
Thank you. That's very concise, methodical. And I think for the audience, people listening, that's some great information that they can hopefully incorporate into whatever they do, if they're in cybersecurity or even just another profession. What are some of the personal professional practices, maybe things that have helped you really consistently stay ahead in this domain? Is it networking? Is it having like an Audible account and Headway or Masterclass? What are you doing to kind of keep up? Because you seem extremely knowledgeable and keeping up on things, and with the things that are probably on your plate, I'm sure it's difficult to keep up with a lot of the technology and just the domain in general. But what are you doing today, and what do you recommend to incorporate to stay ahead and learn?
No, great question. So Some of them I learned it along the way, and probably we can flavor it in a different way. But for audience, I always do more than asked. So that is one of the big skill which you can develop. That if you're asked only to do A, just don't do A. Look at B and C and see how you can contribute to B and C. Second one is communication is key. So I'm trying to learn and take so many lessons both on LinkedIn and at NYU, Harvard, CMU as well, on how do I communicate to board of directors, because that is one of the very key skill set which you need as a risk manager when you run all these big risk portfolios for Fortune 100, 200 companies. And then communication is key, and you've heard this 110 times. It's always about the soft skills which takes you to places. The third one which you said is networking. You all, if you have one single gift which is not costing you an arm and a leg, is your network. And 9 out of 10 times the network happens based on what you can give back to the community. So I do a lot of these speaking engagements, I do a lot of mentoring at universities, just to give back. And what I receive back is sometimes I sit with all these 18-year 19-year-old kids, understanding their dreams, their vision. I learn a lot from them as well. And at the same time, when I do all these big speaking engagements, there's so many times I really like someone who had an amazing thought process and an amazing speech. I'll go up and say, I want to learn from you. Do you have 30 minutes in the next 3 months? We exchange some notes? 9 out of 10 times they'll not say no. And vice versa happens with me as well, where I speak in these gigs and people come to me and say, A, either I want to know more about you, or B, I want to learn XYZ, which I'm struggling with. And then I'm like, let's put time on calendar. It'll not be in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but we'll get there. And I've made so many mentors like that in the industry. And then the last one which I'm doing is, and this is a shameless plug for LinkedIn, but LinkedIn has so many free resources, and then what to do in each and every domain. It can be marketing, how AI is shaping up marketing, how AI is shaping up risk, how AI is shaping up manufacturing, how AI is shaping up sales, how AI is shaping up what do you say, raising funds, how AI is shaping up non-profits. And then there are verticals where all these influencers are just publishing new material daily. They're telling you what classes to take. Most of them are like free, or they're like $20 a month, so it will not cost you a lot. Do that. I myself have been doing so much of that. And then at the same time, you also get all these free resources. And at that point of time, we say, just use all these resources, learn from that as much as you can, and we can just improve our skill set.
Yeah, and I mean, for the cost of LinkedIn, I mean, I guess the basic's free, but even for premium, you're at $100 and you're getting Linda and so many other things. The
Yep.
access of people, information, knowledge. I mean, it's really just it's crowdsourced intelligence. It's amazing the value you can get out of LinkedIn, and hopefully the people from LinkedIn aren't listening to this and saying, "Man, we need to raise our prices." But it is just a valuable tool, even just the free portion. So thank you for that answer. What do you use for AI? Just like your daily, do you use ChatGPT? Do you use Grok? Do you use
I
several?
use all three. So I have ChatGPT, I have what do you say, Claude. I really like Gemini as well. Gemini has some really cool features on the cyber side, from profanity, on abuse, on ethical AI. They're doing a lot of work as well there. And then of course, I'm ex Microsoft, especially coming from Azure, so I have a very soft corner for Copilot and ChatGPT, and like all old school OpenAI people.
Okay, excellent. I got a certification in Microsoft a couple of weeks ago. I attended a seminar and got a certification. You built your cyber risk and compliance programs from ground up, right? I mean, what's your end-to-end approach and the strategy to deploy a new program?
A very good question, Nick. So, ground up, you have to look at three different things. First is culture. How are you going to change the culture, both tactically as well as up? Second is, how are you going to change the tech? And the third is, how are you going to communicate your KPIs and the KRIs? So a lot of people don't think about the KPIs, the KRIs, and the metrics which you'll measure throughout. And at that point of time, your program generally is successful, but you don't know how to quantify that. So those are three big pillars I start. And the first thing is, um, one of the biggest thing is, when I start the program is I do two things. Look at the culture and see how much of that culture will work in our favor. If not, then design a strategy which will help us pivot in the direction we want to pivot. And then an example is, when I started my role at Uber, first one of the biggest challenge which was given to me was, can you go and automate the issues management platform at scale? And an example is, if you have a server which is not patched from say 100 days, that becomes a very important issue. But then, is that server client facing? Is that server carrying customer data? And is that patch relevant? And is that relevant enough that you need to patch it in 8 hours? And if it was not patched for 100 days, does it even seem relevant? All that was completely manual, and it was all on big spreadsheets. So when I started the role, the first thing was, A, quantify the ROI if we automate this. B, how can we plug this into the engineering pipeline so that it becomes very much an integrated machine, and engineers will be measured on how they take security into account. And C, how much risk we reduce patching these kind of servers. And then this is a very simple example for the common people outside. There are a lot of very complicated examples like secrets in code, identity theft, insider threat. And so there are a lot of issues and risks which we see during that program, but everything is again out there. And then there were people contesting the severity, the priority, and as well as the acceptance criteria on why it will get patched or not, right? So what I did was, I assembled a team. We started talking to engineers, and we said, let's take all the criterias which we know from last 4 years. So we first look at 4 years data, close to 200,000 of these tickets. We started breaking it into chunks, that which of them engineers really acted upon quickly, why, what was the sentiment behind it, so which groups have some sort of logic 0 and 1, compared to the groups which were completely wild west. So we started influencing the groups which had logic zeros and ones to prioritize them, and then showed them a much more robust logic. And then we used all that criteria, told ML engineers to write code for us, and then it started feeding the whole ecosystem of those issues right at the top. So as soon as the issue is raised, that project is called Project Matterhorn. It's just in Uber public directory as well, so I'm not talking anything confidential. And Matterhorn is again based on the mountain in Switzerland, because I like mountains, I like to climb and all that. So that's where the name comes from. And um, it was a hard mountain to climb, because we were changing culture. We were telling people that you are opening 30,000 tickets a year. You should not open 30,000 tickets a year. You should only open 3,000, which will be relevant. So we are busting your head against that culture as well, and then telling them that you can do some more work which is relevant somewhere else rather than doing all this. And then see automating it. So then still telling people that this automation will help you, and it will not take your job away in any sense or form. Just be with us and help us automate the heck out of it, so that we can prioritize all these real issues compared to all the fluff which we have in the environment. So that is like one example of a program. It took us close to 9 months to roll out everything in production, and then now it's live, up and running. And then it is one of the most, what do you say, coveted program into Uber's platform engineering domain, which runs all the infrastructure. I'm super proud of the team as well. The hard part is then going back and tying those to KRIs and KPIs and saying how much of it has been impacting our risk portfolio. Like, how do you tie that we close these 10 issues that were all P0s or high priority or critical priority, and based on the timeline, we took only 8 hours to close them. We reduce the risk from, say, $2 million value loss on an Uber Eats service to, say, only 100,000. So that is the bridge which everyone has to think, that you write your OKRs, your key results, right at the start of the program. You tie it to your KPIs and KRIs, that if you close 20 issues a month, it will yield you in XYZ dollar value saved, or it will yield you in greater visibility of your risk. Either or, it can be a quantitative metric or a qualitative metric or a combination of both. And then you can showcase that to the board.
Hey, Empire Builders, we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Reflection: from surviving economic collapse to leading security transformations in high-stakes environments, Hardik Mehta's story is a powerful reminder that we rarely control our external circumstances, but we always control our mindset. Whether he was adapting to new cultures, convincing resistant teams to change, or building AI systems during regulatory upheaval, Hardik led with emotional discipline and clarity. This quote captures the essence of his leadership. Composure is strength. For anyone navigating uncertainty, transition, or challenge, this is your reminder to master your inner game. This week's Stoic quote is brought to you by Czar Clothing, the most sustainable athleisure wear for men and women. Build your empire with style and purpose. Build your empire with Czar Clothing. Visit czarclothing.com and use the code ZAR25 for 15% off your cart. Let's dive back into the interview. This is the Build Your Empire podcast. Okay. So it sounds like when you come into a role, you're doing your research, right? Interviewing, talking to people, doing kind of a front-end analysis and then a gap analysis, right? Do you put that typically into a report, either for record or for management to let them know
Yeah,
what exactly you're doing?
100% and 100%. And then the interview process also at these roles are very stringent. So that is also one advice I want to give to people, that you just don't take a role based on what you hear during the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
You do your research outside as well. So you tap into your network, tap into your mentors and say, is this a good role to go? Will I really be challenged into? Will I be really pushed to the back of the wall and said, hey, do this? And do you want to even do something like that? Are you in the season of your life where we can accommodate something like that? Because a lot of time people just take the role for either the brand value or either just to have fun. And then when they start and in first 3 months, they're so miserable that they're not enjoying either the brand or they're not having fun. So I do a lot of research outside also, that yes, this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do and this is how incrementally I will improve. It's all about incrementally improving you better yourself every day as you wake up, rather than what you were before is always a goal. And B, I put that into a report. So always I have a 30-day check-in after the role, 60-day check-in, 90-day check-in. I call it the impressions. And then a Q1 check-in, Q2 check-in, and a Q3 check-in, and a Q4 check-in, so that I keep myself honest that this is the direction we want to go, this is the direction I'm going, and then this is where the energies are aligned.
Excellent. Great answer. Excellent answer. You've mentioned before, I think in somewhere where you talked about hearts and minds and winning over, I guess, the tactical ways to get people to work together, engineering, legal, product teams, and buy into risk and security. Because I know you walk into a lot of these organizations and legal or even networking versus infrastructure. Well, that's networking. That's the security guys. I don't touch that. And so a lot of people want to draw that delineation that, hey, that's not my job, but security is everybody's job. And some people don't get that, right? So how do you win the hearts and the minds and get everyone to work together? And look, if you're in the legal group, I mean, yeah, it's not your job, but maybe you still have to spend 3% or 5% of your job thinking about security, right? Not clicking on phishing, right? Not downloading some nefarious files. So how do you get everybody on board?
Oh, really good question, Nick. So, and I owe this to my early days at ADP, and I owe this to a lot of my consulting time at PwC, RSM, and and EY. Where, as you said, I was just thrown into these big boardrooms and asked to present the strategy of how we will transform a program in 6 months and then save Caterpillars, for example, $10 million, right? And those conversations are very hard, and those conversations comes with a lot of resistance from the stakeholders, because, as I said, I'm either taking a tech stack away from the stakeholder, I'm either normalizing teams from three different teams, or I'm just telling them whatever you're doing is completely garbage. We'll hit pause, We'll take a week or 2 weeks, re-strategize the whole thing. I've done that for a couple of my big clients, and then have faith in me. This is the strategy, this is the vision, this is a plan, and then that's how we'll execute it. You brought up a very good point, and on hearts and minds. I think you need three key factors to win hearts and minds. One is the autonomy. You need complete autonomy to do that transformation. You need a lot of authorization from your senior leaders saying that, yes, you have the authority now. You have the autonomy, you have the authority, and then you have the awareness. If you don't have the awareness, so I call it the three A's. If you don't have the awareness of what buttons to push, how much to push, and where and why to push, you'll definitely end up breaking that relationship. And then you don't want to break a relationship. And so what I do is, on the autonomy and the authorization, 9 out of 10 times I'll say, this is what board of directors want. This is coming from the top. You'll have to do it. We'll have to do it either way. So let's just do it in a very nice, what do you say, collaborative manner and cohesive manner. So those are my two C's. And then we'll hear it out. And sometimes I'll be wrong, I'll use your approach. Sometimes you'll be wrong, I'll use my approach. Or sometimes we'll just collaborate and do a hybrid approach. I don't know any of that, but let's just put all our cards on the deck, and then see where we go. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing, which is really important in the cyber world, is you have to connect the dots from the engineering. Like a lot of engineers, 9 out of 10 times, the engineers don't want to patch a system. They don't. They are measured on the features they release. So, for example, at Azure, your engineers will be measured at how many lines of code they write. They'll not be measured at, hey, they patched 10 servers last night. Their bonus ties on the features they release compared to the servers they patch. So what is in it for them? I have to show them the ROI that if you do the security work, you're making your life easier by not breaking your systems. You're doing all these CI/CD pipeline work and merging code in the right way, so that when auditors come, you don't have to produce extra evidence. Everything is in one single place because you're doing it now in the manner which I'm telling you to do it. So you show them the carrot and the stick, and then you show them that this is what you will get by adopting these standard procedures, measuring the baselines, keeping the baselines active, and then at the tail of it, what you do is, if you cannot do that, can we do a risk acceptance or an exception? That, okay, we cannot follow all this because of XY reason, either
Right.
it's scale, either it's agility, or either it's just product demand. That something of that nature just does not work on the product anymore. The tech stack is completely changed. So then you go to your VP and say, I cannot muck around with this product. Let it be for at least 3 weeks. This is generating me $10 million a day. I cannot do anything of that nature to that product right now. I accept the risk. And then that's when the hard conversation happens, that if you accept the risk and the product goes down because of this exploit or this wall, whose neck is on the line? I'm just giving you the numbers. It will be your neck and your VP's neck. Are you willing to do that as well? So that's a hard conversation you have. 9 out of 10 times the VP is like, go and patch the system. So I'm not going to accept that risk. So either it's the collaborative, cohesive way, or either it's telling them that if you don't do this, these are the outcomes, giving them all the options of the outcomes and letting them decide on how they want to proceed. I think has helped me tremendously. And then one thing which my mentor really started telling me in last 6 7 years, when I started Microsoft, was there's always a social fabric. People don't talk about that social fabric in any environment and in any corporation you go. But once you start understanding that social fabric, and then once you start understanding what drives everyone, you start influencing them in that manner. And then that's also, again, a very soft skill, a very hidden skill, which people learn just from experience and walking into these tough conversations. That apart from the hard zeros and ones and what is on paper, you need that social fabric to influence people and then get something done.
Thank you. That's a great, phenomenal answer. At Uber, you're embedding risk fabric across the business. What's that look like on a day-to-day basis? How do you keep things in check?
Really good question. So matter one which I spoke about is the what do you say, output of that. What input is what we are building is we are building a risk fabric, which is a very custom bespoke signal collector, and it collects all the data from our data sets, how much data we are taking in, sending out globally, how many of the threats we are collecting, insider threats, outsider threats, how our employees are perceiving those threats, what are the nation political threats we get from external sources, what are market compliance, trade compliance, export import legal implications on our product. So once you get all that data, the risk fabric will start measuring that data, and there are controls aligned to each of them, and the controls are the frameworks from CIS, NIST, CSF, NIST 853. Now there's this AIRMF, and then there's a DORA framework which just came out like 90 days back. You look at all those, you design your unified control framework, and you start testing those controls. So you tell your offensive security team that these are my controls, let's just break them and see what we get. And once we get them, we start filing post-incident response tickets and say these were what we saw, the deficiencies in our control environment, that if we internally can break it that easily, external people will break it very quickly. So then we feed that again. We do a lot of remediation. Remediation is automated at scale as well. And then we learn that. And then we now are trying to put all that into an AI model, and start giving leadership top five risk like on a weekly basis. Initially, it was very hard to even do top five risk on a quarterly basis because it was so stagnant, it was so manual, it was so mundane that I had to interview people that, hey, head of finance, what are your five risks? Head of business, what are your five risks? Head of treasury, what are your five risks? But now we are collecting all these data sets, feeding it to an AI solution. My systems are trying to break them, and then we are relearning constantly. By I would say end of Q2, Q3, we want to just start publishing that report completely automatically. So that's that risk fabric which you're talking. It's again highly agile, highly nimble, and it is at scale.
So for leaders trying to build something similar today and similar to your role, what's one of the common pitfalls or red flags maybe they need to avoid, or what red flags they may see, and what should they avoid?
Really good question. So don't boil the ocean. Start from something small. Do that as a POC. As I said, go to a couple of engineering teams or even your biggest bang for the buck. 9 out of 10 times it is the identity platforms which are not governed well. You have so much non-human identities lying around. You have so many external vendors' identity lying around. So either start from there or start from your assets, that these are your top 20 critical crown jewel assets across the globe. There's five of them are sitting in America, five of them are in Singapore, five of them are in EMEA, five of them are in Latin. Let's just look at those 20, see what are the walls on those 20 and how do you hit those 20 and then try to break them. So that's the second option. And the third one is you can do just your cloud. 9 out of 10 times right now, everything is cloud based. So look at your cloud providers, ask them these integrated questions that can you give me a risk report on what my cloud walls are and where do I put my focus on. They will give you at least a sample, and you can start from that sample and say, hey, if I'm a GCP customer, Google will give me top 10 walls in my environment. Are they really top 10, or they're just doing that at the surface value? And then you can start from there and start quantifying it, start improving it, and then automating it. So there are ways to cut it, but go small. Make what you say a case where you can quickly be successful, pitch it to your leadership, get that extra dollar value and the funding for it, and then just blow it out. Because once it has worked for a couple of your complex cases, and in fact I would say take three cases, two of them should be the hardest cases to solve, because if when you're starting fresh you have so much energy that you can solve the hard cases pretty quickly compared to the soft cases. So take the hard case first, solve that out. That will also give leadership a lot of confidence that this guy knows or this gal knows what they're doing. And then your funding will become a little bit easier. Get the second or third level funding. It's very much like a startup. And then just blow it up.
Great answer. I like how you said break things down, because I mean every marathon starts with the first few steps, right?
Yeah.
And the marathon, 26 miles, can be overwhelming when you think about it, right? And just comparing the marathon to when you walk into a situation, but breaking that down into maybe the first mile or two, or even the first few steps, you've got to start somewhere, start small so you don't get overwhelmed. So I think that's great advice. So let's talk about Gen AI. I mean, it's certainly reshaping, how things operate, and certainly how, or attackers strike. What's your take on the biggest unseen risks emerging in this space today? And it's happening so fast. It's amazing. I mean, just in the last 18 months to see where AI has gone from 18 months ago to today, and where's it going to be another 18 months? But what do you see as the biggest unseen risk that's emerging?
No, very good question. So, what we like to call it, especially I like to call it, is this all emerging tech. So, AI is nothing but a software which just runs at quantum speed, and then you need compute to run it. And a lot of these industries, especially tech industries, at scale on West Coast, and Israel, where the tech boom is. Um, they are pitching everything with AI, but the unseen risk on the back end side of it is that everyone is itching to work on it. So 10 years back, there was this term called shadow IT, that I really like this Windows server. I really like this Windows operating system or Linux operating system. I want to write my own code. I will go and ask for $10,000 to my leadership, get that server procured, put it under my desk and play with it, and then hook it to my corporate network. So what one of the big things which I recommend, and a lot of companies are actually putting governance hat around it, is around shadow AI, where there are a lot of these siloed verticals, like finance will be one, audit will be another, treasury will be the third, infrastructure will be fourth, which will say, I want to do my own AI thing. I want to start up 10 different services, 10 different use cases. I have $2 million lying around. I'm going to hire 20 engineers and then we'll just do all of that in house. Um, is there a governance around it? Do you have ethical AI boundaries around it? Do you know what are the guardrails you need to put? Do you have a centralized funnel of choking it if it goes sideways? Do you have a budget approval process which is completely tied to your IT budget, infrastructure budget, and technology budget? So all these are like the factors or the assumptions which people right now are not seeing, and they're just jumping in. Some of the corporations, of course, like Uber, Netflix, I talk to them a lot, Airbnb, Microsoft, and Amazon, they are the pioneers, right? And then they have good guardrails to direct this kind of, what do you say, requirement. But a lot of other startups and then even banks and healthcare industries are struggling with it. I speak to a lot of these C-level executives all the time. They don't know where to start, and they don't know how to put ethical, safe guardrails around those implementation, and that is one of the biggest unseen risks. The second unseen risk is once it becomes so prevalent and you give this to a 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old, especially on the products which are customer facing, like Uber, right, or DoorDash or Airbnb, where customer is frustrated with something, where food is delivered wrong, or your room is not the room which was shown in the picture, and you start typing things to AI that, hey AI, this is not what it is, and then suddenly the argument gets heated up, and the customer writes XYZ as a profane statement. Your AI should not give you a profane answer. So because now you then they can sue that corporation, and then you are now in liability that your models were not trained enough and your models are emitting profane, racially profiling, abusive behavior. So that is one of the big things which you need to understand and train your RAGs, train your data models. That where is it heading? How do you direct the conversation? If you don't know the conversation, can you stop the conversation? Can you get a man in middle and direct the customer to make a phone call? So these are just the liability risk, the reputation risk. On the cyber side, we are looking at a lot of different attacks surface, because now your data is everywhere, and you're using the data to train your models. How do you prevent the data from entering a polluted database? How do you make sure that the data itself does not get in the hands of external models and external open models which are publicly facing? So there are extra perimeters, your extra boundaries, extra access control, networks, and governance around your just golden data sets, as we call it, is critically important. And there are like a lot of automated factors on top of it, but there's always a governance mechanism on how do you release that data set, how does the data set gets evaluated before it actually becomes a test data set, and then how do you gather the scale and the accuracy, and what does that accuracy even look like in terms of releasing a data set where we say the answers which we want, should it be 80% accurate, 85% accurate, 90% accurate, or 100% accurate, and then reaching that 100% takes at least 6 months. So then by that time, if you keep that data into a live environment, and some bad actors get access to it, you have that liability that now that data will be in dark web. So these are some of the big emerging risks which we are looking at the AI and implementing AI.
So I have kind of a follow-up question to that. And you mentioned all these different types of AI and AI models, right? Because you'll have SaaS applications, you'll have your ChatGPTs and Grok and things like that. And it seems like AI will eventually be very fragmented, right? So the ServiceNow app may not talk to Splunk or whatever. It almost seems like that might be potentially an area where there's a threat, because these independent AI systems that are in a specific application may not talk to some of the others. So I'm wondering if there's a need for like a DevSecOps or a software that sits on top to really manage and orchestrate AI at a higher level and allow all of that knowledge from AI across the entire infrastructure to go in one place. So you have a single point where you can see everything. I don't know. I just think that if it's
No,
fragmented,
100%.
it could
There's
make
a
you
scope.
vulnerable.
So Azure Copilot does that. They call it as a Azure Fabric. Who else does that? So Uber does that very similarly. We called that
Okay.
as compliance guardrails. And then Amazon has something inbuilt as well. I'm just charging my device. And Amazon does something very similar. But one of the big thing is those third-party integrators, as you called, and then we are doing it very carefully. We have a Slack bot integration with ServiceNow, we have a Slack bot integration with Jira, we have a Slack bot integration with SharePoint, we have a Slack bot integration with Google Drive, and most of them are automated bots. Where initially there was a person sitting behind it, and you make a phone call, and you're like, "Hey, I lost my phone, or I forgot my phone in Uber last night. Can you contact the driver, and then where the driver is, and then I can pick it up, or can the driver drop it?" Right now, all that is integrated on the backend side between, so our ticketing system is ServiceNow, Jira, and then a couple of other systems. And then that's when you have to be very careful on, as I said, what do you disclose? Where the driver is, you cannot disclose that. Where did you left the phone? You cannot disclose that. And there are a lot of privacy regulations as well. In each country, you can only disclose XYZ. Sometimes you cannot even say that if we have the phone or we don't have the phone, because that becomes a liability as well. And then you have to then go back and go into your lost and found directory, because everything has to be logged. And then how do you keep that in track as well? And then these third party actors, as you said, are definitely just sitting on these external APIs, and trying to just get into your systems using these external APIs. And if you don't protect them, as well as you don't integrate them, and then put zero trust on top of it, you definitely have a lot to lose.
Yeah, and with the APIs, I think you can do a phenomenal job at Uber protecting yourself, but you're connected to vendor A, right? And they're not protecting their software. So the best bet for an attacker is to go there, right? Because
Yep.
they're not protecting the forward, and maybe they can cross a
Yeah.
bridge into Uber. So I think API security is going to be a big and bigger thing, because you just find the path of least resistance, right? The weakest point. And
Yep.
if that's your third party vendor, I'm going to go in there, and then I'm going to cross the bridge and get into Uber or wherever. So I can see that being a big problem. At Microsoft, you helped launch a self-service cloud native compliance platform using AI and machine learning. What were some of the breakthrough moments that made that possible? And
Oh, really good question. Really good question. So, I want to give a shout out to all the Copilot team and OpenAI team, the early days of 2021 and 2022 while we were playing. My role was I was running compliance. So I was running SOX, PCI, FedRAMP, which is regulated, what do you say, defense certification for US or North American entities. And I used to feed my requirements to these AI bots. Initially, we had a team from a big four consulting company testing my requirements controls manually. We used to spend $2 million a year with them, and they had like 20 people between India and Philippines, and they used to test the control, give us a report on a weekly basis, and we used to then fix those controls. So what we did is we went to Copilot team and said, these are all the alerts which we want. These are the controls, and these are the health of the controls from the last manual test. let's pick up the out of 500 controls. We said let's pick up the top 100 controls which just yield us the highest value. Take 3 months, and can you automate the whole thing end to end? And they were able to automate that in a month. So I was like, this is really good value. And B, it is also it is also, I would say, um um the innovation which goes at scale, right, where they want to use that as own dog food, and we want to use that to showcase our clients. So my other part of the role was I used to go to the risk officers of Coca-Cola, Bank of America, like top 10 Microsoft clients, using my consulting background, and say we are using this automation internally in-house to do compliance or to protect our perimeter. And this comes for free with the latest Azure stack. You just have it, you have not enabled it. Do you want to enable it? I'll help you enable it, and you'll save 3 headcount, 800 hours in 6 months, and see if you like it or not. So that kept me a lot, what do you say, excited and energized as well, because now I'm talking to clients who are struggling in the similar realm. Most of them are Fortune 50, and they have Azure, but they don't know how to use the native stack to just do compliance at scale, because then most of the clients used to use third party vendors like Archer, ServiceNow, IBM as a central funnel to do all that. So I'm like, hey, in 6 months you'll be able to get rid of that if you want to. If not, your native stack can do so much, so then your audit heaviness will decrease and your efficiency will increase.
What's the one emerging tech trend that excites you but also worries you? It makes maybe people going to be more vulnerable at the same time.
Oh, I'm really scared with deepfakes. So the precision with deepfakes are going in the AI world. The precision with which the AI solutions are giving answers. I just read it last night that there were three AI bots which gave California bar exam, and one came at 99 percentile, one came at 96 percentile, and one came at 90 percentile. So all three became lawyers in a matter of 2 hours. So the California bar is longer than 2 hours. They just took 2 hours and gave that test, and all of three were in 90 percentile. So I'm like, how do you distinguish that? How do you prevent that? And this is just one of the daily worries. But also, I have a 5 year old, right? And then he's not yet exposed to tech yet. But in next 5 years, where tech is going, it just gives me a lot of jitters that he will be in a very different world.
Yeah, very different world. What are the three most important ingredients for building a strong risk culture?
Oh, very good question. I would say the biggest ingredient is looking at your risk appetite. Every corporation has a very different risk appetite, how much you're willing to let go in terms of fines, in terms of regulations, in terms of what do you say, operating awareness. Where do you want to operate? What economies you want to strike? And how do you want to increase that margin of your business, but keeping the risk appetite in hand is one of the biggest thing, which generally board and senior leaders ask always. What is my margin? What is my EBITDA? Where will the stock price go if I don't do this and I pay a $10 million fine? So that's the first thing. Second is integrating all these native frameworks into your control landscape, and trying to test the control continuously. What we in the tech world call is continuous monitoring or continuous assurance. So you trust what you verify, and you do it non-stop. If you have the scale, you do it daily. Worst case, you do it weekly. But just don't take a very shortcut approach to that. And the third one is your people. You'll still need really good people to find that needle in a haystack, and to defend something which what AI is showing. So it's just not the end of the world where people think that, hey, I'll be obsolete. No, not at all. You just need to learn new tech better. You need to be very good at Python. You need to be good at prompt engineering. You need to be very good at extracting value from all these emerging tech. But then your value will be to showcase it to your leadership, what you're doing, why you're doing, and where will you go. No, a bot cannot do that.
Yeah, you talked earlier about presenting, I guess, to the boards. So and I know the boards can absolutely terrify a CEO, right? When you get the board meeting next week. What have you learned about these, leadership during moments of high pressure, like major incidents, or when you have to go do a board level presentation? What have you learned there? Because that could be scary, right? Because you've
Very
got some pretty
scary.
powerful eyeballs, examining you, right, and questioning everything you're going through. right?
No, very scary. So what we do is we work backwards. We do 60-day prep. All and I'm sitting in the second line of business where I talk to my auditors all the time, both internal and external, and all the findings, all the deficiency get vetted out 60 days in advance. What is going to the board? Why is it a red or a critical? And where is my program headed? So that is the first thing, that prep. The questions generally you need to prep are: why do I care? Why was it not remediated? And where are we going next? So those are three very important questions you need to prep for. Keep it simple. These senior leaders will generally ask you for 30 seconds and not more, and it is very much a zero and a one answer. Keep it very simple, very nimble. And the third one is no surprises. That comes from the prep as well, but that also comes from a lot of transparency between different groups, say audit, treasury, legal, security, risk, and IT, that this is the reason we could not meet the deadline. This is how we are going to, what do you say, measure it going forward. These are my compensating controls. So even if we did not meet the deadline and it's still red, the risk to the organization remains low. Why does it remain low? You need to have numbers and then text behind it. And then sometimes they even will ask you for a follow up for next 30 minutes to show if they are not convinced. So you need to have all this appendix prepared or a live demo prepared for them. And then the last one is just be very honest upfront that this is what we planned for in our planning cycles, and you need to integrate all this into your planning cycle. This is how much progress we have made, and this is where we are going. If we need more money, we'll ask for it. Right now we don't. Sometimes you do. So sometimes it becomes a funding question right away, that we gave you $10 million to do this new implementation of a system. You've already exhausted 8 million in 6 months. What is your run rate, and then where you're going? So be open and honest about it as well, that why did you exhaust that much amount of funding? Where is your next funding going to happen? Or do you need funding? Why should they give you that extra funding? These are some of the questions. And then for practitioners, I would say be very much integrated with your general counsel, because general counsel generally, especially in highly regulated industries, they are very tight. But in tech, I would say still be tighter, because they will tell you if SEC will knock on your door or not, if the incident is material or not, if FTC will knock on your door or not. So use that attorney-client privilege, run all the use cases by them, and ask them point blank: is this material? Do I disclose this? Why do I don't disclose this? And then what happens from there?
I think it was the book, The E-Myth,
Yeah.
that I read a while back. And I think that one of the things that they talked about in there was building processes and things in place so you could either exit the business, or if you're not there, those things are in place for it to operate, right? Because you're pretty important. But if you're not there, if you're on vacation, whatever. And so I guess my question around that is, what's your approach to developing future leaders, especially in cybersecurity, where burnout is pretty high, the talent gap is real, and in the event that maybe you take vacation for 3 weeks and you're out of pocket, you take one of your wonderful excursions, and or so how do you address the leadership to make sure that people can kind of fill in when you're not around to lead there, right? Or if a problem arises, they have the ability to walk through the process and solve it without you, if for some reason maybe you're on a plane, you're just not available.
I would say you do two things. First is you always build backup, both in tech as well as in personnel. So you need to have people who you trust, and you always do cross pollination, as I like to call it. That I always do that with my team. That you should know the business of your peer, and your peer should know your business enough that they can solve a real-time critical situation, or they can navigate the resources the way leadership wants when you're not around, because life does not stop. Someone will be not well, someone will be on vacation, someone's kid is in graduation, and then you don't want to make that phone call while your kid is graduating for at least that 8 hours, and so on. So cross pollination, cross training is really extremely important, and that's where you also want leaders and peers who are your allies, right? And then you find those allies, that if I'm out, XYZ knows my business very well, every single thing which has been asked for. And at the same time, Documentation is everything. So I don't know if you know, but Amazon is big on that one pager culture and the two pizza principle, which we at Uber also use that from culture and principle very much, which is your team should be always the size of two large pizzas or two XL pizzas. So those two XL pizzas can feed your team generally. So keep it small, keep it nimble. You can have dotted lines, and then you can influence people and you can work with them on that broader horizon. And the one pager culture is that you just don't show up to a meeting. You write the problem statement, you define it, you define the whys, the whats, the whens, and the hows, and then you give it a week in advance so that leaders can get time to digest it, put comments, put objections to it. And then when you meet with them for 30 minutes after a week, once that document is completely skimmed through, you're just talking the main things of either you're getting someone's concerns resolved, or either you're just taking a buy-in and saying this is the direction, everyone has agreed to it, anyone has any challenges or questions, we'll solve it. And then put all that into a wiki page, as we like to call it, or an engineering sheet or a SharePoint old school, and then just document the heck out of every single thing so that when really I would say things go wrong, people can start looking at the documentation, and the documentation is very exhaustive. It has an engineering requirement document, it has an architecture diagram, it has a PRD, it has a BRD, it has a complete funding life cycle. So when you need all that, you can just trace it, and you can say, this is what my what do you say BCDR plan is. If something is not working, let's just get out of it. And this is my DR plan, or this is my go-to-market strategy. If I'm launching something new and something goes haywire, can we pivot from the go-to-market strategy? Or the third one, especially on the risk side, is these are the deficiencies which we envisioned and we predicted. Are they matching one to one? And if not, and we found a new one, is this fitting in the category? If not, then let's just invent a new category and then just try to solve that right away. So document, have a backup plan, have a release notes plan that if something goes wrong, you can just get out of that release pretty quickly. And you can back to the best working what do you say solution you have, and then just communicate to your leaders that these are my allies, that I'll be out, they'll be able to run the business.
Just a couple more questions then. I wanted to find out what your risk philosophy is when it comes to moving fast and breaking things versus slowing down to secure. And I guess the second part of that is, do you believe in security should be fully implemented throughout the development cycle as DevSecOps model, or is there still a place for traditional end stage security review? So where do you balance that? Do you try to go one way or the other, or does it depend case on case or by
No, mostly
application?
it is mostly with cloud, and then we going into CI/CD, and especially with Azure, and I looking at compliance. It becomes very fruitful to do DevSecOps right at the top, and just use what we call it Uber is safe release. So in cloud world, it is DevSecOps. In Uber and in other tech terms, it is safe deployment, safe release. Is you use certain procedures, certain pipelines to merge your code, to migrate your code, which gives you enough control over change management, access management, release management, and evidence management. So all those 4 or 5 pillars of your audit are covered. And once you train your engineers to follow that DevSecOps models, that the code will be merged every Friday between 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific. There'll be a freeze, there'll be a blockout. You'll need to follow these procedures, and this is the only way to merge code. It just becomes much more simpler. But before that Friday comes, you go through a couple of cycles of your ERD reviews, as I said, engineering review, document review, PRD reviews, where it's like a old school CAB committee, change authority board, coming in, and these are very senior engineers asking you some of the hard questions that how will you back out? What is there a chance that you have not looked at the backdoor entry on your code? Have you covered your dots and measured your T's? And do you have evidence management around it? How many super users are on that code? How will you revoke that access once the code is merged into the pipeline? So you need to come up with the answers and the evidence, and then they get a check mark, and then that Friday comes and you're able to just click a button and the code merges. It gives you a lot of what you say relief, because now you know what pipeline it is going through. You have followed all your deployment protocols, and see if you then anticipate any vulnerability coming on that code, since you merge it using the DevSecOps model, the vulnerabilities will start flowing through your DevSecOps systems automatically. And then the SOC will start getting alerted, my team will start getting alerted, and we'll file either an issue or we'll either file an exception right away. So all that also takes care of itself. So I'm a huge, huge believer that DevSecOps is the way to go. On top of it, we are putting more agentic AI controls on it so that we now even reduce the latency behind the pipeline merging and the code getting generated out. So there will be more API security on the DevSecOps model itself. But otherwise, I think that is the way to go.
So what legacy do you want to leave behind, not just in cybersecurity, but in leadership?
Oh, wow. That's a very, very deep question. And thank you for asking that. For me, and I learned this from my mentor, I want to be known as a person who creates leaders. And then that's what you'll be measured on. The tech stack, the titles I'll have, the money I'll make, the places I'll go will all go away. But I want to be known as a person who is willing to give back to the community. And in 5 or 10 years, when I'm setting my son down on my career, I say, hey, I helped create 5 chief risk officers, or I helped create senior directors in these 10 countries, and then I'm grooming them, coaching them, mentoring them, and then they are taking the bastion forward and helping the community as much as I would do.
Awesome. Any advice for best piece of advice you've received that helped you build your own empire?
Yes, the two of them. One is resilience is underrated. So be super resilient. Life will knock you down at multiple times and multiple stages in both personal and professional world. But how resilient you are and how much grit you have. And then I'm a big Rocky Balboa fan, so it's always counts and how much punches you take. But it counts that after each punch you get up and you are back in the ring to take one more punch. That matters a lot to me, and then that's how I've been just operating in my life. And the second one is always be empathetic and kind. Kindness is also underrated. You can still be a very successful leader, but you can be kind and compassionate at the same time.
Well, thank you very much for joining the Build Your Empire podcast. Just before we leave, how can people follow you, connect with you? What's the best way? Do you have a couple places? Do you prefer LinkedIn? Can you share?
LinkedIn is the best place. I'm super active there, and then I'm trying to release my own repository as well. It will be out sometime by end of Q2. But that
Okay.
will also be published on LinkedIn, and then people will be able to get time on using that repository, and then they'll be able to see my calendar much more openly. That has been one feedback which I've got, so I'm working on that as well. But right
Okay.
now, LinkedIn is the easiest.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for joining the Build Your Empire podcast. This
Oh,
has
my
been,
pleasure, Nicholas. I really had a good conversation.
yeah, this is great. It's very insightful. We went over a lot longer than I had anticipated, but I probably could ask you 24 more questions and we could probably go for hours because you're a wealth of information and process. I love how you answered all the questions. So thank you so much today. And, hopefully we can have you back maybe in
Sure.
a few months or
100%.
later on as things develop at Uber.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in to the Build Your Empire podcast. Producing the show takes time, money, and resources, and we deeply appreciate your support. Here are 3 simple ways you can help us keep this broadcast going strong. Number 1, visit our website at buildyourempirepodcast.com to join our email list. Stay updated on future episodes, exclusive content, and everything happening in the Build Your Empire community. Second, if you'd like to make a small donation to support the podcast, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/buildyourempirepodcast. Every contribution helps us continue to share inspiring stories and valuable insights. Thirdly, maintain the Build Your Empire mindset with some comfortable and stylish athleisure wear from czarclothing.com. Whether it's for you or a gift for someone you care about, you'll find apparel designed to empower you to build your empire. Use code ZAR25 for 15% off your shopping cart. And finally, if there's a specific guest or topic you'd like to see on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a line at nicholas@buildyourempirepodcast.com. That's NICHOLAS @buildyourempirepodcast.com. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, let's keep building empires. We'll see you on our next podcast.